morning, everybody. So, as usual, on-site events, we can usually wait to start the morning, but right now we're doing hybrid, so we need to be right on the clock. Where should I start this? Maybe with the clicker. That would be a good idea. I was thinking actually yesterday how to open this conference, and I woke up around 3:30 in the morning and I said, like, that is not it. So I don't know how it is for you, but I saw my team for the first time in 2 years last Sunday, and it was a very weird experience. We didn't know if we should hug each other, you know, elbow, all of these things. It seems like standing on this stage, yesterday I was standing here, and it was empty, and it felt like just an energy, and it was really, really nice and good. But today, it feels really, really heavy. It seems like nothing has changed. Like this, actually, we have done it like 1 month ago. In the same time, so many things have changed. So many things. So welcome back on site, and we have really, really miss you. Some of you maybe know this, but for me, this is very, very emotional, so to say. I didn't feel that it's going to be like this. This is how it is going to be. First of all, my name is Goran Svetanovsky. I am the Chief Editorial Director at Hyperight. Our team will take care of this event for the next 2 days. This is actually what we have prepared for you. So it's a 2 days of event, which basically starts in a plenum in these 2 rooms. And after 10 o'clock, this room will be closed in 2. And then we will have M1, M2, and then the rest of them, as you can see, they are colored with a different color. So we have 5 of them here, and the machine learning is downstairs. So we will start in plenum, we will move to tracks, then we have the networking lunch, we have the track session, we have the demos or the technology and practice sessions, and then you have more track session, and then we have the after work and everything else. The next day is also very similar. We start with keynotes, we have the technology and practice session, demos, track sessions again, and then towards the end of the event. Now, usually when you go to conferences, you choose basically from one of the stages, and that is going to happen even now. However, we are doing this event differently. So, as I mentioned, like nothing has changed, but so much has changed in the same time. So we are executing this event as a hybrid event, which means that we have an on-site format and online format. The difference between the on-site and online format is that you are experiencing this together with somebody else, and the online, we are experiencing this through Agorify. It's also basically, if you are here, you're experiencing this live, but you can also experience the event on demand. So that means all the presentations that are right now presented here and streamed here are immediately available in the app. The app becomes the crucial part of the entire conference. You ask questions with the app, you listen to the presentations, you go through the replays and everything else. So everything is done through the app. The reason why we are doing this is because we want to do something different. So we want to move from a transient experience, which is basically a very short-sighted, a short-time experience in events, to a little bit more continuous experience and long-term. So that means that the app and the event doesn't end today. You can still continue to be in the platform and meet each other and listen to presentations and everything else in 5 weeks from now. So the event doesn't end today or tomorrow, it continues. So this is the best thing with a continuous experience and events. So this is the first time that we are doing this. We have been very nervous to organize this event as well. So this is the first big event in Stockholm, actually. So I'm sure that we will make mistakes. But bear with us, we are trying to disrupt the dinosaur industry. That is what is happening. Good. So, without no further ado, we start with an intro video, and then let's start the show, right? Oh, no, wait. Give me a second. Yes, let's do this.
Ametoro Shava.
What is the profile of a modern CXO, a CEO, a CMO, for instance, that want to leverage data assets? The first element, again, going back to the boardroom, when you enter the boardroom, when you meet with these people, there is a kind of mystic around it. Okay, it's magical. That's where the magic happens. Okay, so we usually say that a leader needs to have a vision. Okay, he's going to come, he's going to change and to turn around the company because he has a vision, he has a recipe, he knows what is going to happen in 5 years in the sector, in the industry. Okay. In the data era, it's not vision. It's to be able to be context aware. And I'm going to explain why, okay? So, sorry. Context is everything today. And context is about seeing the light in a volatile world. Volatility is everywhere.
Trailer before you get on stage, or you imagine having that going down for breakfast, right? That would feel good. Please stand up. Say hello to your neighbor. Very quickly. Hi. Maybe Corona style, I'm not sure. We're on site. How cool is that? I'm super, I don't know. I had a strange feeling walking in here yesterday. Wow. A little bit back to normal in some ways, but use the topic of meeting and networking, sense making together, co-creation, knowledge sharing. Love it. So, thank you for participating. Time stands still in an elevator stuck just below the floor, top floor, in one of the impressive buildings in Stockholm. An insightful, can you handle the truth conversation unfolds between the CDO and the CEO of one of Stockholm's crown jewels. So, imagine you were stuck in an elevator with your management team and your CEO, and for once, they were not going anywhere. For once, we could talk the way we wanted to talk. And they ask you, what is this deal with AI transformation? How is that going to pan out? How do we need to change? What is AI transformation? How should we look at it? What would you talk about? What would you say? Planning for this keynote, I started with that simple idea. And I wrote a little conversation, like a novel. I was imagining what would be the perfect conversation. How would that flow? How would that flow? What would happen? What would we talk about? So what I'm talking about on stage today, you can have a novel as a conversational storytelling piece. You can find it in the booth over where Dairdux is. So everything we have on stage here, more or less, you can find it in a storytelling approach. It's one for everyone. So go and pick it up afterwards. Maybe that will help. Maybe that could be some use. Now, the first whole conversation starts with the CDO telling the management team, there is no AI strategy. There is no AI transformation. There's only business strategy and transformation attuned to a data and AI software first society. So we start on that note. The interesting thing to start with then, how do we contextualize AI transformation? In what light should we look at it? Starting with data AI software part of core business. Data AI software part of core business. So AI without data won't really fly, right? And AI in isolation that you can't put back into production or put down into your business will not really be a transformation, will it? So one thing we can talk about is the transformative power of AI. And I think if we have worked in this space, we are trying to get a grip on this. And I think the more you've been in the industry, we feel it, we sense it. The business guys who has not really done the data education or this, they haven't really maybe always understood where this is going. So we are coming where we had our computational power increasing. We see in everything from hardware to software, the camera becomes more digital, the truck becomes more digital. So we are having this topic, and then we are always connected with the internet and all that. So all this is happening, and then we get AI on top of this. With some sort of promise to being a general purpose technology, that what makes this transformative. It's like electricity. We will have algorithms and anything. So general purpose to automate and optimize. But to automate and optimize what? In my views, simply put, automating brain power. Automating data-intensive processes. So if the industrial era was all about automating manual labor in the factory or even in the office, so now we are moving into automating more knowledge-intensive processes. And ultimately, what is around the corner here is that it's going all the way down to how we create software. So we are getting into a new coding paradigm. It has just really started, but we will not write all the codes anymore. We will instruct the algorithm to write code for us. So when you think about that, how you increase the speed on software development, and then this loop comes together, it's transformative. So AI transformation now, what is that all about? How should we look at that? What's the transformation about? Well, if you look at Bill Schmarzo, who is this first keynote speaker here today, he will be talking right after me here. He is world leader in understanding data monetization or the value of data and AI. And he highlights the understanding of this as moving into the first and second inflection point. And you listen carefully to what Bill is talking about, because he's talking about ultimately value. And here we have now the second inflection point. So it's the fundamental topic of data and AI value at scale. So if you want to talk about this as a transformative topic, you need to be somewhere thinking about this. When is this pervasive? So pervasive data and AI in everything is the second inflection point. Now, at this conference, if we're going to look at this from another view, everything we talk about on these conferences, in my opinion, the different stages that we are looking at here, that you can go, is looking at many different facets, ultimately, about how we can do data product analytic, AI asset models at industrial scale, at scale. So we're all thinking about how we can do it better. And the core strategy, core story here, one way of looking at this then, is that the AI transformation, if you have a technocratic view on it, it's about us racing to reach the tipping point and a critical mass of available data products, algorithm assets, available for industrialized sharing and reuse. And why is this a tipping point? Well, it's a tipping point in the world, but it's actually more importantly a tipping point within our organizations. It's much easier to do one algorithm use fast, to do one insight in Excel, right? But if you do that over and over again, you kind of will not going to scale it, it's not going to fly, and the actual cost of maintaining all this is not going to be there. And then Bill Schmarzo talked about orphaned analytics, so things that are really not connecting. And with AI, and a big important lesson is that if you want to get to the next level of insight, it's about contextualization. So I have the vibrations of a wind turbine, and I can do analytics on this, but it's more interesting if I want to do return on capital employed optimize maintenance. So I want to have my turbines and my predicted maintenance connected to my cost in my company, maybe even connected to the market Nord Pool. Now we can start planning really smart. Okay, so if I zoom into this topic now, if I take Bill Schmarzo's ideas and then say, well, ultimately to do data and AI at scale, you are now needing to leave the macro life cycle of the industrial society and move into how data AI software companies work. So fundamentally, the big innovators in the world here, they are the tech giants. The reason why we can't really understand them and why they're valued so much is because they're on a different S curve. They're on a different curve. And our main job here is to talk about AI transformation, in my opinion, does not become the technology topic, or it becomes a huge technology topic, but we will not get anything from that technology topic if we don't master how to zoom in to this transformation. And then basically, we have many organizations, so most of the world is actually on the industrial societal curve, and this is when we start talking about in the AI After Work podcast, we have talked about the AI divide. It's essentially, we have a growing divide in the world where we have some very few companies who are living under a different world order, so to speak. And that is scary when the concentration of power in terms of knowing or being on the new S-curve is with very few people. So I think it's very, very important that we reinvent ourselves. We disrupt ourselves rather than having 10 companies in the world disrupting the rest of us. And this is not a program, my dear friends. This is a pivot. And why is it ultimately a pivot? Because when you're in the mature stage of any life cycle, you are focusing on efficiencies. You're focusing on incremental innovation. And when you're in the pioneering stage, in the growth stage, you're doing something new, your fundamental outset is different. And that can be hard to reimagine or think about. The company I work with is more than 100 years old. The two last companies I worked with is more than 100 years old. So that was a long time we were pioneers. So we need to get that going. We need to do that. And that's what the rest of this conversation now is going to be all about. It's going to be how can we look at this pivot? And we think there's a way to hack this approach. So how do we go from looking at AI on top of our analog ways of working today to actually start driving a journey that stepwise takes us onto the next curve? So we're going to zoom into this pivot. AI transformation to me, if I'm trying to understand it, what it really means we need to work on, it's how do we organize the pivot and how do we look like when we are running on the new S-curve. So let's look at that. So basically, I'm going to highlight two concepts that we're going to talk about. First principles and to dare. And first principles we start with, and then that is something you always need to do first. You need to start from the business context. And then we move into to dare. And to dare for us means understanding what I call first principles of AI transformation. And then we are talking about the organizing principles in data AI software first. So it's about truly understanding better sense-making on what we are trying to do in order for us to then do it at home in our own context. So there is not one size fits all. There's not a secret recipe, but there are fundamentals to be understood, and with better understanding of those fundamentals, sense-making, I think we have a chance to get this done. First principles. In a nutshell, Elon Musk, go out and Google Elon Musk and how he talks about first principles. In a nutshell, it's about having something that you do, a business model, a process, an engineering problem, and break that down in its core components, and then trying to understand what that is all about. How can I do it better? How can I do it? How can I reimagine stuff? First, Plato, Aristotle, philosophically used, coined first principles so you can Google Aristotle, Google Mr. Musk. Now, the interesting topic here that we are doing now first principle in a very concrete context of intersectional innovation. So when we think data and AI will be pervasive, it means whatever we do needs to be infused with data and AI. So basically, we actually have a starting point on these first principles. It's about this. But the core idea here, you need to start with the first principles about business. So you can't start with the technology dimension. You need to do first principles on this. And you can think about this on process level, in the nitty-gritty stack. How do I reinvent an accounting process? How do I reinvent my management reporting? Or you can think about it like on the whole business model. How do I go from being a truck manufacturer to a transport ecosystem player, as an example. Now, these first principles of AI transformation, we have talked about it quite a bit earlier, and read about it in detail in this booklet. But it's some fundamental topics about being intersectional, it's about being perpetual. The main thing that is hard to understand is that we need to be hypothesis-driven. So the planning approach, the waterfall approach is dead. The business planning approach, the way we do it with the stable business, is to some degree dead as well. So how do we get hypothesis-driven approaches in? Both because we're in the pioneering stage, but ultimately also because you can't do AI, you can't work with algorithms if you're not having a scientific method, if you're not hypothesis-driven. You need to explore, you need to model, you need to validate, you need to deploy. Right? So your whole business needs to think like that. Systemic balance change is not enough to fix the algorithm. You need to fix the processes, the people, the training. You need to have the data. You need to have the tech stack. So there are many facets that you need to balance, and you need to figure that out in the use case lifecycle. We talked about this before. Learning organization, how do we sharpen the saw? What is a little bit new that we haven't talked so much before is stuff that we have talked a lot on the AI After Work podcast. How do we organize? What's the principles of the AI software first? So I had the pleasure to talk to some of the best guys that you can find in Sweden that worked in Google, that worked in Spotify, and really pick their brains. And this is the AI after work. This is when we turn off the cameras even. And here we start understanding that there are some fundamentals how they all think. I mean, like we organize our critical KPIs around innovation and scaling speed. We start organizing our company very clearly around our business value chains. The difference is here that the data and AI value chain is part of the core business, so we kind of need to line up data and AI and how we organize the teams with our core business. So now we're sort of flipping how we look at IT. We need to have an industrialized factory and IT approach. It's a very industrialized approach to data and AI. And if you start going into the factory, you start understanding who operates the factory as a building and who operates the assembly lines. You need both, right? You need the guys to build the factory and you need the guys working on the assembly line. You need to have governance now. It becomes platforms, and if you're going to have business and IT having a different interface, your governance between business and IT becomes different. It becomes federated. Ways of working, this is DevOps. You have a use case lifecycle. You're not going to get away from your hypothesis to production, ideation to production flow. That's it. Value chain means modular. You start understanding this as not the huge monolith, but the different modules of your business. What is my data universe? What's my AI universe around this business value chain, i.e. this domain? And we start looking at IT in terms of infrastructure as code, templates, GitLab, GitHub, all this stuff that the technicians in this room knows all about in order to reuse. And ultimately, the next step is how do we code, how do we build systems for industrialized reuse and sharing? So ultimately sharing data products, sharing models and algorithms. So whatever we have done before that has left us in an orphaned approach, we need to do something else on top of that to really take this further. So I used to talk about data assets, analytical assets. Now I talk about data products, analytical products. Because we need to be able to consume them in our companies like they're products in the marketplace. So, how does this relate to this conference? This one-pager summary of what I talked and gave a snapshot on, and please come to our booth and we can pick apart every single piece of that or read it a little bit more in this book. What we have here, I think, with data and AI innovation is amazing because there is no one else who is trying, like Hyperight, to basically sort out the different pieces of the puzzles, specifically the technology pieces, the ways of working pieces on the operational side. So we will have the applied innovation stage here today. How do we innovate? What's the methods we use here? Service design, design thinking. How does that fit into the puzzle? And we have the machine learning, we have the data management, we have the data engineering. So it's a massive puzzle we need to lay. And what I'm trying to do with this opening keynote is basically saying the tricky point is not that we have all this tech. The tricky point is how do we build this as a machinery? How do we make all these things we now pick up in here into cogs in a machinery? That's what this conference is all about, understanding the pieces of the machinery, and then we go home and try to feed it into a system, into a model, into an engine, a Dare engine.